The alarm doesn't go off. That's the first thing. Not because you forgot to set it. You turned it off on purpose last night, sitting on the edge of the bed, thumb hovering over the toggle for a second longer than it needed to, like the phone might ask you to confirm. It didn't ask. It just went dark. And you slept the kind of sleep you haven't slept in years, the kind where your body doesn't know yet that anything has changed, but something under the sleep does. You wake up at 6:47 anyway. Habit doesn't care what you decided last night. You lie there for a minute, staring at the ceiling fan, waiting for the old pressure to show up. The mental scroll through the day's meetings, the thing you forgot to send, the calendar already loading in your head before your eyes are even open. It doesn't come. There's just the fan, turning slowly, and the sound of a car starting somewhere down the block. You get up. You make coffee the same way you've made it for 6 years. The same grinder, the same 4 scoops, the same 20 seconds of bloom before you pour. Nothing about the kitchen looks different. Nothing about you looks different. That's the part almost nobody understands until they've lived it. The morning you become financially free looks, from the outside, exactly like every other morning you've ever had. You take the coffee to the window. This is the part you've been picturing for months. Quietly, at your desk, in traffic, in the shower. Not the number in the account, not the resignation email, but this specific moment. Standing at your own window, holding a cup of coffee, watching your neighbors leave for work. Mr. Alvarez backs out of his driveway at 7:12, like always. Coffee mug wedged into the cup holder, tie already crooked. The Kwan family's minivan idles for exactly 90 seconds before Priya walks her daughter to the corner, where the bus stops. 2 doors down, someone you've never officially met jogs to his car with his shirt half-buttoned, the universal posture of a person who is already late. You watch all of it the way you'd watch a nature documentary. Familiar, rhythmic, no longer yours. You're not smug about it. That surprises you a little. You expected to feel something bigger, triumphant maybe, or at least loud on the inside. Instead, it's quiet. It's just coffee, and a window, and the specific relief of not needing to be anywhere by 8:30 ever again. Here's what got you to this window, compressed into the version you'd give if anyone asked, which nobody will, because nobody knows yet. You didn't win anything. You didn't get a payout, an inheritance, a lucky ticket. You spent 11 years doing what the last few videos in your feed have started calling the gap, the distance between what came in and what went out. And you protected that gap the way some people protect a diet or a training schedule, quietly, without announcing it every time you succeeded. Somewhere around year 7, the gap started compounding faster than your raises did. Somewhere around year 9, you ran the number for the first time and didn't believe it. You ran it again. 25 times your annual spending, sitting in low-cost index funds and a handful of boring bond positions, was $1,410,000. Your spending, the real number, not the aspirational one, was $54,000 a year. You did the math on a Tuesday night in the same kitchen you're standing in right now, and the math said you were done. Not almost done. Done. You didn't quit the next day. That's not how this works when you've built the habit of not reacting. You sat with it for 4 months. You let your accountant confirm it. You let a fee-only advisor stress test it against a bad decade, a worse decade, a sequence of returns nightmare scenario that would have broken a less padded plan. The plan held. And 2 weeks ago, on an ordinary Thursday, you gave your notice. Not with the fireworks people imagine, just a short email and a 2-week transition plan, the same tone you'd use to request a vacation day. Nobody at work knows this is permanent. As far as they're concerned, you're taking some time off to figure out next steps. That phrase is doing a lot of work, and you chose it carefully. It's vague enough to be true and boring enough that nobody follows up. This is the first rule of the day you're now living, and it's one you settled on a long time before you ever needed it. The goal isn't to look poor, and it isn't to look rich. The goal is to look unremarkable. Financial independence, done quietly, isn't a costume change. Nothing about your car, your apartment, or your wardrobe is supposed to shift the week this happens. You're still driving the same 6-year-old Camry with 91,000 miles on it. You're still in the same 2-bedroom rental you signed for back when the plan was still a spreadsheet and not a bank balance. The version of you that could afford to upgrade everything right now is the same version of you who decided, a long time ago, that upgrading everything is exactly how people stay employed until they're 70. You finish the coffee. You do the dishes. 1 mug, 1 spoon. And then you do something that would look, to anyone watching, like the most ordinary Tuesday imaginable. Laundry. You carry the basket down to the building's laundry room at 9:40, which is a time slot that used to belong exclusively to retirees and the unemployed, and today, for the first time, belongs to you in both categories depending on who's asking. You load the machine. You feed it quarters you keep in an old protein powder tub, the same tub you've used for 4 years, because the system works, and there was never a reason to change it. While the machine runs, you sit on the plastic chair against the wall and read on your phone, and nobody comes in. The room is exactly as empty as it always is at this hour, except now you notice the emptiness instead of resenting it, because for 6 years this was 15 stolen minutes squeezed in before a shift, and today it's not stolen from anything. This is the first quiet victory of the day, and it's almost insultingly small. Doing laundry at 9:40 on a Tuesday with nowhere else to be. Nobody applauds it. Nobody could even see it if they tried. But it's the truest measurement of what actually changed. Not the number in the account. The number changed months ago and felt like nothing. This is the thing the number bought. You fold the clothes upstairs, put them away, and then you do the second thing on the list you didn't write down anywhere, because writing it down would have made it a plan, and plans have a way of becoming performances. You go to the grocery store. It's 10:15 on a Tuesday morning, and the store is nearly empty. 2 employees restocking the cereal aisle. An older man in the produce section taking his time with the avocados, pressing each one with a patience that used to make you impatient when you were the person shopping during your one free hour on a Saturday, elbow to elbow with everyone else living the same compressed schedule. Today you take that same patience. You stand in front of the avocados for longer than the task requires, not because you're indecisive, but because you can. There's no line at the register. The cashier, a woman who's rung you up dozens of times over the years without either of you ever exchanging more than, "Have a good one," scans your items and says, "Slow day for you today?" And you say, something like that, and she doesn't ask a follow-up question, because nobody ever does. This is the second rule you've settled into without ever writing it down. You never lie, and you never explain more than the moment requires. Something like that is true. It's also nothing. Both things can be true at once, and that's the whole skill. By noon, you're at the movie theater, which is the part of the day you'd been most looking forward to without admitting it to yourself, because it felt almost too small a thing to want this badly. A 12:20 matinee, a theater with maybe 6 other people in it, all of them either retired or on a day off from something you'll never know about, all of you sharing the unspoken solidarity of people who are somewhere other than where the world assumes you should be. You buy popcorn because you can, not because it's a splurge. You did the math on this too, a long time ago. The movie ticket and the popcorn together cost less than a single hour of your old commute cost you in gas and stress combined. And you're allowed to think that way about small joys without it meaning something is wrong with you. You sit in the middle of an almost empty theater and watch a movie at an hour when almost nobody else in your life is doing anything except the thing they have to be doing. That's the secret, if there is one. It was never going to be a yacht. It was never going to be a mansion or a new car or a life visibly different enough that people would ask what happened. It was going to be this: a Tuesday matinee, an empty grocery store, a laundry room nobody else wants at 9:40. The biggest change in your life happened entirely on the inside, and the outside of your life is engineered, on purpose, not to show it. The test of that design comes at 2:30, when you run into Marcus from the old office at the coffee shop 3 blocks from your apartment. The one you go to sometimes when you want a change of scenery from your own kitchen. Marcus works 2 floors up from where your desk used to be. He's on a coffee run, visibly mid-shift, phone in one hand, badge still clipped to his belt. "Hey, didn't you leave a couple weeks ago?" he says, and there it is. The question you knew was coming eventually, and have already answered 100 times in your head. "Yeah, taking some time to figure out what's next," you say, which is the same sentence you gave your old manager, delivered with the same easy shrug, because consistency is the whole game. If the story changes depending on who's asking, people notice. If it never changes, nobody thinks to check. "Must be nice," he says, half joking, the way people say it when they mean it a little. "It's all right so far," you say, and you mean that too, in the driest, truest way possible. He doesn't ask what you're living on. People almost never do. Not directly. There's a social discomfort around that question that works in your favor every time. But if he had asked, if anyone ever does, you have an answer ready. The same one you settled on a long time ago for the version of this conversation that's most likely to actually happen. What do you do for a living? This is the question, phrased however it comes at you. At a coffee shop, at a wedding, at your cousin's barbecue next month when someone's +1 wants small talk, and the temptation is always to either lie completely or to explain everything, and both are mistakes. The lie eventually gets caught in some detail you forget to maintain. The full truth invites math you don't want anyone doing about your bank account in their head. The answer that actually works, the one that's genuinely true and genuinely uninteresting, is something like, "I do some consulting," or "I'm doing some freelance work right now," or "on days you don't feel like elaborating at all, simply, a bit of this and that. None of these are lies. All of them are boring enough that the conversation moves on to something else within 30 seconds, which is the entire objective. Nobody has ever followed up a bit of this and that with a forensic accounting question. The goal was never to have a clever answer. The goal was to have an answer boring enough that the question dies on contact. Marcus checks his phone, says he's got to get back, and heads out with his coffee. The whole interaction took 90 seconds. Nothing about it will register with him past this afternoon. You, on the other hand, walk home turning it over. Not with anxiety, just with the quiet satisfaction of a system working exactly the way you built it to work. The rest of the afternoon disappears into things that don't sound like anything when you list them. You read on the balcony for an hour. You call your sister, who has no idea any of this happened yet, and talk about nothing in particular. You go for a walk at 4 o'clock, the hour when the neighborhood is emptiest, before school buses and commuters start filling the sidewalks back up. And you notice, the way you've started noticing everything today, that this hour used to belong to nobody you knew, and now it belongs to you specifically, on purpose, indefinitely. You cook dinner at a normal hour. You don't buy anything expensive. You don't post anything. There is no photo of a sunset captioned with something about new beginnings. No announcement, no version of this day that exists anywhere except inside your own head, and, now, in the account balances you check once a week out of habit more than necessity. The number moved exactly $0 today in any direction you'd notice. That was always the plan. The plan was never to spend differently the day you stopped working. The plan was to keep spending like someone who still has to earn it, indefinitely, because that habit is the entire reason the number got large enough to let you stop earning it in the first place. By evening, you're back at the same window where the day started. Coffee traded for something else now, watching the same driveways in reverse. Mr. Alvarez pulling back in at 6:40, tie already loosened, the Quan minivan idling again while backpacks get unloaded. From the outside, nothing about your street changed today. From the outside, nothing about you changed today. You went to the movies. You did your laundry. You ran into an old coworker and gave him the same answer you always give. But you know what the day actually was, even if nobody else does, even if nobody else ever will unless you decide to tell them, which you might not. It was the first day of the rest of a life you built slowly, on purpose, without ever needing anyone to notice you were building it. And somewhere down the block, in a driveway just like yours, someone else might be living the exact same kind of morning right now, quiet, unannounced, indistinguishable from every other Tuesday, and you'd have absolutely no way of knowing it just by looking. That's sort of the point. That's sort of the point.